vital. It's absolutely.
Without it, how could you have ever done Fingerprints of the Gods?
I could not.
You'd have to. I mean, and the initial thing where you were telling me about Ethiopia, that place where they believe that the Ark of the Covenant lays, which is one of the most bizarre ideas ever. Mm-hmm. And
that was my first book on a historical mystery, was The Sign and the Seal, A Quest for the Lost Ark.
Try, and when you go into it, like, it's so interesting. But I've always imagined you as a young guy forced to sort of reconcile with this bizarre piece of evidence. You've got these old men that have cataracts in their eyes, like they're around radiation sites, and no one's allowed to go inside and see this thing, and they claim they have the Ark of the Covenant in there, and like, what the fuck is in there? You know, like,
it was the beginning of a of a magical journey for me.
It's been a magical journey for all your fans too. For guys like me, man, when I read Fingerprints of the Gods, it was. To me, it was one of those books I just couldn't put down, and it was so mind-blowing. And this, again, was in the heart of my fucking aliens, man.
Fingerprints was published in 1995, and Magicians came out in 2015. And I would say in that time, the evidence, when I made the case for a lost civilization and a global cataclysm in Fingerprints of the Gods, I can't begin to account for the amount of hostility and anger and rage that I generated in the academic community. And the idea was considered to be absolutely absurd. 20 years later, with Magicians of the Gods, it's not so absurd anymore. The evidence is mounting. We have incredible evidence now for a global cataclysm in exactly the period that counts, between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. And we have sites like Göbekli Tepe. We have a redefinition of the Sphinx. The whole area is just about to explode in the future. We're on the edge, I believe, of a paradigm shift, and this comet material is central to it.
What I really appreciate about your courage is that you've also had the courage to admit when you've made mistakes. Yeah. You don't in any way pretend to be some sort of a bearer of secret knowledge that no one else possesses.
And absolutely not a guru. I don't want to be anything like that. I'm a reporter. That's right. What I am, and I'm a reporter who's reporting on offbeat subjects. And to some extent, I'm an outsider. So one of the talks I do now is about being an outsider. I think there is a place for outsiders in society.
Well, I don't think you're an outsider. I think you're an outsider from the established mainstream ideas. I just think that ideas.
Me and Randall are the same. We're both outsiders in that area and working in different fields to get into this.
But don't you think that these established channels that were so deeply grooved in distributing information, those things have widened so wide now, where you're getting, a professor could do a podcast. Like he could teach a class and he could write a book. Or he can do a podcast on a certain subject. And like, you're aware of Dan Carlin and that Hardcore History podcast,
sure,
which I just can't stop raving about. But what he's done is brought historical, accurate, but really dramatic stories of real events that took place to millions. Like, that's just, that no one's doing that. Like but it's not mainstream. Well, what's more mainstream than being #1 on the iTunes podcast list, which he is all the time? What is more mainstream than he must be getting millions of downloads?
It's part of the big change that's taking place in our society. The old structures are being overthrown. They're being thrown away. It's a very uncomfortable time. It's a very uncertain time. It's a very exciting time, because we can build out of this something amazing in the future. The internet's had a huge part to play in it. The fact that people can communicate with one another all around the world.
Well, since I've had a web presence in the last, I was a late comer, but maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I've been getting contacted by, professionals from around the world. I've got probably a dozen major ones. Geologists who want to know more about. And interestingly, you said earlier about debating. I'm always looking for somebody to debate about this.
Right.
I because I have questions, and I'm thinking maybe somebody who would disagree with me on something could still help me answer some of those questions.
Right.
But I try to associate as much as possible and hang out with professionals in the field. And of course, what I discover is that a lot of them are working in these things part-time, almost